I shine the bright light of reason. I'm Larry Elder. Join me tonight at 7 right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So there's a vote in Australia on same-sex marriage, and a Christian organization called Dads for Kids tried to run a television commercial in support of fatherhood. And this is in the run-up to Father's Day, which is September 3rd in Australia. Dads for Kids opposes the redefinition of marriage. And here's what the ad...
Oh,
good. Give you a little taste of it. Yeah.
Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Daddy's gonna sing you a lullaby. When you're sleeping safe and sound, you've got the proudest dad in town. I remember when I first saw you, your heart beating as you grew. We'll read stories to help you dream. Your mommy and I are a perfect team.
And it goes from there.
Well,
I know. Well, you were falling asleep.
No, I was going to my happy
place. Yeah, I was
place.
afraid I was going to have to nurse you. So it was just that. It was just images of dads with their sons and daughters.
Okay. Was it same sex? No, just dads with their sons and daughters, right?
Yeah, and
okay.
Because
no mom in there.
There were images of that too, but because there were no same-sex fathers, the ad was not allowed to be run.
What?
The networks in Australia, such as they are, rejected the ad. You can't have Father's Day if you don't include same-sex fathers.
So a dad and a father, because that's what they call them.
Okay.
Well,
if you say so.
Katie's got a dad and a father.
Well, and so this is an interesting segue to our next guest, who has written a book that's on this topic. The book is Cheap Sex: The Transformation of Men, Marriage, and Monogamy. The author is Mark Regnerus, or Regnerus. Wait, I'm mangling it. He's a sociology professor at University of Texas at Austin. And Mark, whose last name I just mangled, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Is it Regnerus?
Regnerus.
Regnerus. And,
there you go.
Okay. So cheap sex.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it just means it's an observation that sex is easier to get than it ever has been. I mean, in terms of access of men to women, basically, and not just sort of. We're not just talking about sort of, intercourse. We're talking about sort of when you think about internet pornography, it is more realistic than ever before. So that too is sexual access. So if you look around, you compare it to several decades ago, and any time in the past, really. Men's sexual access to women is unparalleled in history.
And so what are the consequences of that?
Well, there's quite a few consequences if you think about it. One of the reasons we see sort of the slowing age at marriage, but even more importantly that the almost wholesale flight from marriage today. So you think about, okay, people wait longer, but far fewer people than ever before are doing this, getting married. So Demayer was, for the longest time, said, about 8 to 10% of people don't marry on average. And now they're saying, I think that this generation of 20-somethings, 1 in 3 is not going to get married. And so you think, well, is it because they don't want to? I see no evidence that they don't want to. So you have to start fishing around and saying, well, why aren't they, right? And I come back to this. I mean, people used to say, oh, it's wages, if men's wages were higher. Well, that helps, for sure. But that's not the answer. So you look around for what's going on today that hasn't gone on in the past. And I think this is it.
Well, is it a possibility, though, that more men or boys are living at home with their parents because, heck, you can stay on mommy and daddy's health insurance until you're 26? And I know that's
part of it.
Yeah.
But even that's a financial incentive. But I mean, if you think about men, right, and talk to your colleague, like, what do men like, right? What do they want in life? And you don't have to stray too far, too long, to wind up with a sexual relationship. And it's an incentive that always motivates men. And if it's satisfied in your parents' basement until you're 26, then, that just takes a motivation for moving towards women out of the way. It slows things down.
So, but it does, Amy have a point there, not just the economic piece of that, living in your parents' basement on the insurance till 26, but the infantilization of men. Right. And also, a kind of corollary, the culture that says, hey, Dad, we don't really need you.
And if fathers cared a ton, they would push back hard. But one of the things that I hold is that, well, why are so many men putting up with this, right? Well, I think if we reel it back in a little bit, it goes back to, at some level, their needs are being satisfied. And if their needs are not being satisfied, then they will work for that. They will push for that, press for that. And I think that it's an unheralded answer. It's an unexamined answer. But that cheap sex or easy sexual access is in the background here. We see rates of cohabitation rising. I think cohabitation, we do it not because women really want that. Their end goal is marriage. They do it because men are in the driver's seat in the modern mating market because of how the sort of what I call the price of sex has plummeted so much.
Well, Mark, in this day of equality, gender equality, do you ever see a time when women will be the ones who ask men to marry them?
No, I actually address that in my book. I talk about I've heard of it. It happens occasionally, but it's a very awkward thing, right? It's usually not get down on your knee and say, will you marry me? Because that's not how men operate, right? I mean, that would be men kind of acceding to marriage, not being men being asked to be married. So when women pose this, and a few do, it's kind of like hey, what do you think about this idea, right? Mm-hmm. Why don't we get married?
Check, please.
And then he might agree. But it's very different than men saying, you are the one. I'm going to sacrifice for you, right? And so women sometimes have this idea that, well, the way to a man's heart is in the bedroom. And I think that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of men.
So you've in your book you cite a number of psychologists who've done some study of this phenomenon. I believe you've done some of your own. Some of the shibboleths out there about the reason for lack of or declining marriage rates, for example, men's fear of commitment. You suggest that that's not the case at all.
Men have never been afraid to commit in the past. In fact, men are great when great things are asked of them, right? When they have to sacrifice. They don't really wish to sacrifice, but until you make them do so, their sort of latent greatness will not emerge. So I don't think men are afraid of commitment. The deal is that commitment is seldom asked of them in order to accomplish this thing, sex, that they always want, frankly.
Do you think if a man's not married by, say, age 44, 45, that there's still hope, that maybe they just haven't been challenged yet? Let him answer the question.
I'm very interested in the answer to this question, Mark. That may be my age range, and that may be my marital status.
There are very different reasons that men marry at various ages or not marry. And, some people have vocations to singlehood and feel called to it. Some people get comfortable in it, and, one of my best friends from my youth just, he dated plenty when he was younger, but nothing stuck, and he has grown comfortable in his sort of independent ways. And that's fine. I mean, I'm not here to get everybody married. What I'm here is, in part, to help is sort of diagnose why it is that a lot of people say they want to get married, but it doesn't actually happen.
And with respect to the impact of a decline in marriage on both men and women? I mean, in addition to the forming of fewer families, what are some of the kind of long-term societal and cultural impacts that we need to contemplate?
Yeah, I think when you talk about a whole segment of the population not marrying, you're talking about a lot more loneliness, right? One of the themes I keep hearing both from left and right in this stuff is increasing loneliness, more technology, but the more separated we are from each other.
We're going to marry. It's going to be Joaquin Phoenix's movie Her come to life. We're going to marry our operating systems.
You know, I mentioned that in the back of my book. It's like this one of the more realistic kind of scenarios. I mean, people think it's silly, but you know what? If an operating system talks to you, gets to understand you, woo you, like that's pretty attractive, especially I'd say to women more than to men. I mean, women are used to being ignored, right? Here's an operating system that keeps talking to them and it remembers everything they said, right?
Yeah.
They just don't nod and smile. This is fantastic.
Well, yeah, but now these are more difficult topics because this is not consistent with the culture of the time. But it is a fundamental issue, the separation of sex from marriage.
Yeah,
separation of sex from procreation. The separation from sex from marriage has occurred quite a long time ago, but also then, more recently in the last 50 years, we've figured out how to separate sex from babies, right? And such that I talk about in the book, like the mental link isn't even there anymore. It's we don't think of this as like, oh, this is risky for pregnancy. We've cut that off such that the two processes in our head, sex and fertility, are just worlds different. You don't have children until you want to have children. Mm-hmm. That is very, very consequential here. So downstream, I mean, we were talking about fertility decline. Nobody cares about fertility decline because it's this big problem that one person can solve by themselves. But yeah, that's a major accomplishment that has come with unintended consequences. All right, he is Mark Regnerus. Right? Did I get that? Mark Regnerus. He's an associate professor of sociology at the University of Texas. The book, very interesting, Cheap Sex, The Transformation of Men, Marriage, and Monogamy. Mark, you've given Amy a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Good luck with the book.
And thank you. I'll give my notes to you, Dan. He joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what